Hey, everybody. My name is Conti Moore Smith. I am a family law attorney located in Orlando, Florida.
Hi, everyone. I'm Frank Symphorien. I'm an attorney, board certified immigration expert, and I'm located in Orlando, Florida as well.
All right. So we are extremely excited to be talking with all of you today and to answer questions that people have regarding family law and immigration. Immigration has become a very hot topic recently, and we felt the need to address it and to be a resource to our community. So I'm so thankful that Frank agreed to come on live today and take time out of his very busy schedule to help address concerns and to answer questions. So, Frank, can you talk to me about some concerns that you're hearing, that you're getting a lot of questions about? What are some hot topics in immigration right now?
Well, today the latest hot topic that just came out, maybe probably 30 minutes, an hour or so ago, is the new registration requirement from the Department of Homeland Security. Apparently, the Department of Homeland Security, there's a statute, Immigration Nationality Act, does require every immigrant or non-immigrant, every foreign person, to register their residence with the United States Department of Homeland Security. Now, that's something that has been in the books for years and nobody's really implemented, enforced, et cetera. There really wasn't a mechanism for doing so, except for after 9/11 when they had Middle Eastern people were required to register. But now apparently they're going to create some new form and they're going to have people register. And so this is going to create a lot of issues. They're claiming that there's going to be some criminal penalties if the person doesn't register. In my opinion, the statute doesn't support that. It only supports civil penalties. So this is going to be a big issue of concern, right, for a lot of immigrants, because, do I come out of the shadows and give my address to immigration? Is that going to give them the authority to go, the information they need to go look for me? Should I leave before they do that? I think that's sort of the intent behind this, is to create fear, panic, and anxiety, and force people to kind of go back on their own, because they don't have the resources to go through every immigrant's home and find you and take you. So they're counting on your fear to kind of make you leave on your own. Other than that, I mean, they just don't have the resources to find you. And so but it is going to present some difficult issues for people as to, do I register? Do I not register? I think the civil penalties, and we have to do some study more on this, but I think if it's just civil penalties, which I think is the only thing that the statute supports, then, you have to kind of do an analysis. And, as attorneys, we have to tell you that you're supposed to register. But, civil penalties, we're not sure what those are, but, it's different than losing your freedom. So that's one of the biggest things. The second thing is, obviously, people are afraid about driving now. DeSantis just came out with something recently, deputizing of, FHP, and obviously local sheriff's departments are asking a lot of questions, of people out there. And, my advice to people in these situations, I mean, I've been telling people this over and over, you need to create a plan right off the bat, make sure you know what you're going to do. I would say number two, keep your documents in order. Get your driver's license, get your work permit, get your kids' documentation, get everything in order. And then number three, be proactive in trying to get residency status, meeting with an attorney. Even if the attorney, tells you no a year ago, I say you need to do that once a year to see if something else comes up, if there's a personal situation that has changed that might change the calculus for you.
So one of the questions that I'm getting a lot is, what should I do if I'm deported? I know from a family law perspective, there's certain things that you can do, like a concurrent temporary custody agreement or arrangement, to where you can have a family member or someone make decisions for your children in the event that you are not able to. So there's certain things that, you can look at. The key is, like you said, being proactive. If you are at risk for this deportation and you have kids that would still remain in the US, you need to make sure that legally there's another adult that can make decisions on behalf of your children. So within the Florida statute, chapter 751, there is a mechanism for us to assist with making sure that there's someone else that can make decisions for your children in the event that you are deported or unable to do so. So that's an option as well. But what I find is that a lot of people just want to bury their head in the sand, and that causes a lot of issues. So it's really important that you are proactive, that if you're at risk, that you take the steps to make sure that your documents are in order, that there's someone who can take care of your children and make decisions on their behalf, because the courts or the schools are not going to let just anyone come in if you're not here and make decisions for your children if they don't have a court order.
Right. And I would say, contact Conti Moore. She's the best in Orlando, to get your documentation, maybe power of attorney, right, to dispose of property, assets, whatever it is that you have here. You're going to have to, deal with that. And obviously, if you want to come back and have a family member that's a U.S. citizen, or, have an investment or a business entity here that you might want to continue to run, et cetera, contact our office, because we can, also look at ways that you can come back to the United States, and, perhaps through that business or perhaps through that family member. But, again, the idea here is to be proactive and try to avoid being deported altogether, right? Because it is difficult, depending on the situation. Once you're in the United States for more than a year, if you're here illegally for more than a year, in general, there's a 10-year bar for you to be able to come back to the United States. There's exceptions to that bar in unique circumstances. If you have a business here and there's a really compelling interest for the United States for you to come back because of your business or something like that, we can make exceptions. Or if you have parents or a spouse that's a U.S. citizen, there's an exception to that as an immigrant visa. But generally, there's that harsh 10-year penalty if you've been here illegally for more than a year, and you're basically going to be barred for 10 years from being able to come back. So you want to be proactive and try to prevent that. That penalty doesn't apply when you're here in the United States. So oftentimes you can change status and get some sort of visa status, because that penalty is triggered only upon your removal from the United States. So, if you can be proactive and try to, get ahead of that issue and resolve it before you're deported, that's the way to go.
So I have a question that someone raised. One of the parents is undocumented and concerned. And so they really need assistance from the court in a divorce, custody, or time sharing is what we say in Florida, a situation, but is in fear of the other person reporting them to ICE. Okay. So we have a parent that's concerned. They want to go to court. They want to get a divorce. They want to see their child, but they are concerned about the other parent contacting ICE. So, and then you can add on, Frank, from an immigration perspective, but from a family law perspective, the courts don't really do an analysis or ask or inquire about your status when you're going through a divorce or a custody issue, or time sharing is what we refer to it in Florida. But that doesn't mean that the other side is not going to report you or try to get ICE to come to the courthouse, or we can't control what the other person may do. But typically in family law cases, they're not, checking for your immigration status. So I don't see the courts or the judges or anyone reporting you to ICE. Now, since COVID has happened, a lot of family law court, not a lot, but there's still some hearings that can be held virtually. We can request, if there's a hardship or if you can't come to court, we can request that you appear virtually. Mediation is typically, for the most part, done virtually. So, I can't say that the other person's not going to be spiteful and try to report you. I don't know if ICE would have the resources to come to the courthouse and do all those things. Like you said, they don't have the resources to do all those things, Frank. But I would definitely, the courts aren't necessarily checking off who's an immigrant, who's not, and filing any reports that I'm aware of to any agency that could come and arrest you for immigration issues. Not to say that they wouldn't or someone wouldn't, but that's not generally how it works. So Frank, do you have anything?
I would say, I have, unfortunately, you cannot eliminate the risk, right? If you're here undocumented, every day is a risk, right? Whether you're going you're driving, which I strongly recommend you don't drive without a license if you don't have a license, right? Because that's one of the easy pickings as to how people are targeted or found by immigration authorities, by just driving. And you get pulled over, they see your tag. Somebody was asking me yesterday, say, I wasn't driving, I was in the car, but the car was registered to me, but I don't have a driver's license. Well, law enforcement in general has to have probable cause that something's going on to stop you. But if they get behind your car and they run your tag, you're brown driving, right? And they get behind your car and they see the tag and they see the owner of the tag has no license, they've got their reason to stop you. And even if you're not driving, they're going to assume that whoever's driving was you. And then, as a bystander, they're going to ask you questions and then you may get detained. So, there's a risk every day. If you're undocumented, unfortunately, there's a risk. But at the same time, in my opinion, this is sort of my personal opinion, whatever your situation with your children and that should come first, right? And Conti, you tell me more, but I would think that regardless of your immigration situation, the court's going to consider the interest of the child and having you as a parent present, whether it's here or anywhere else in the world. And every child deserves to have their parent in their life, right? And I would just say this, that I talk to immigration agents every day, have some of them that are friends, some of them are good, very good people, and they work very hard. They're just doing their job, and others, are not so much. But there's a clear emphasis and focus. Their priority are people with serious criminal violations and people with final removal orders. That's who they're going after. They don't have time to listen to your boyfriend who's mad at you, etc., and just accuses you of, talking him meanly or doing whatever, or your spouse. They don't have time for that. They're laser focused on people who have serious criminal records and prior final deportation orders that they can execute and remove the person from the United States. And obviously, if they have serious criminal issues, they're present a risk to society in general, and that's who they're going after. The rest of the people, they just don't have the resources. Now, if you're a bystander, right, they go to your house, they arrest the person with a serious record, and they find you next to him. They're going to pick you up if you're undocumented. So, don't hang around with people that have serious criminal records. That would be my one big advice, because you never know if the person is undocumented, really, that's a good reason, good advice in general, right? Don't be around people with bad to serious criminal records. But if they have serious criminal records, there's a high probability of immigration, and they're undocumented. There is a probability that immigration is looking for them. And there's also, and if the person has a final deportation order, there's also a good, chance that the government will look for them. So as long as you don't have one of those two categories, right, and you're trying just asserting your rights to your child and just looking out in the best interest of your child, I would say, be bold, be aggressive, don't be afraid, and come forward. But obviously, unfortunately, there is a small amount of risk that we can't eliminate.
That's true. So we have a question from one of the viewers. Does a person who voluntarily, thank you for posting that. Does a person who voluntarily deport themselves be subject to the same timeframe bar? What options are available to them to seek readmission?
Unfortunately, yes, they are. If they've been physically present in the United States for more than a year unlawfully, they entered illegally or their visa, expired. This is not for people who are students, because they're kind of a different duration of stay. But if you're here illegally for more than a year, you're barred from coming back for 10 years, whether the government deports you or whether you leave on your own. It still applies. There are options, as I mentioned earlier. If you're married to if your spouse is a U.S. citizen or your parent is a U.S. citizen, there's a waiver of that unlawful presence that you can file to be able to come back and, be present in that person's life. If you have a business, and there is a compelling interest for the United States at stake, right? And you want to come and invest, create jobs, and do things that would be beneficial to the United States and our society in general. There's a general waiver of inadmissibility for temporary visas, temporary work visas that you could also pursue. They're difficult. The temporary work visas are difficult because in general, you have that issue that they're going to be concerned. Are you actually going to come, return abroad, right? They're always going to be concerned that you're going to stay here illegally. But it's doable. We've done them, and it is possible. But you do have to have a substantial interest. The business has to be a real operating enterprise with substantial benefits to the United States at large.
Okay, great. Thank you for that question. I have another question that was submitted to me. It's a case with the dissolution of marriage with one minor child and both parties are on work visas. What happens if one gets renewed and the other work visa does not get renewed when it comes to time sharing? So I'll let you, does that happen? Do you see that happen, Frank, where one, like they're married and one person's work visa gets renewed and the others does not?
I mean, usually, well, I mean, it happens if they divorce, right? So if the divorce and it's a spousal, usually you don't have two separate work visas. Most of the time, it's a dependent spouse visa, right? So if the divorce becomes final, the visa for the spouse ends automatically by virtue of the divorce. And so that creates an issue where, it's not that the visa isn't renewed, but it's that the spouse who divorced and wasn't the principal on the visa, is now out of status because of the divorce. They don't have the qualifying relationship anymore. So that happens. But as far as, visa not being renewed, I mean, it depends on case by case basis, right? But, the merits of each person's visa. So sometimes it does happen. But I should point out that, immigration, and I guess this you can answer the family law component of this, but in general, immigration does not intend, or the law itself doesn't really say anything about your rights as a parent, right? Or as a spouse. I mean, it's just talking about immigration status. So Conti can address how the courts might treat that if you need to leave and so forth. But, just because you have to leave, it doesn't mean your rights as a parent, are done, right, Conti?
Right. No, I agree. I mean, but if they're not here to exercise time sharing, they're not here to exercise time sharing. So it's not like, oh, well, I have 50-50 time sharing, immigration, let me stay. Like that's,
right.
Not how that works.
Right.
So,
immigration is not going to let you stay by virtue of your time share. I mean, otherwise everybody, unfortunately, your child and your marriage is not a reason for you to remain in the United States in general, unless they're over 21, they can sponsor you. Right.
Right. So, so time sharing, if you're not here to exercise time sharing, you're not here to exercise time sharing.
Can they, I mean, just as a follow up to that though, I mean, are there situations where the court might say that the time sharing has to be exercised abroad as well though? Like if, you have to go back to wherever and it's,
I guess you could,
the child to visit you wherever you're at because you're still a parent, right?
So you could file a supplemental petition to modify time sharing. And that would constitute a substantial change of circumstances and request that time sharing be exercised, I guess where you're at or to figure that out so that you could modify your time sharing schedule based on that.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So yeah, you could definitely have time sharing internationally. Let's talk about another topic that has been really pressing, and that is a concern about law enforcement, specifically ICE, going into schools and talking to children. And so based on my research and my understanding, law enforcement in general can go to schools and they can talk to your children and they may or may not give you notice that they are going to talk to your children. You may find out after the fact, but I'm pretty sure that law enforcement can talk to your children. So the question is, well, what do? Parents cannot invoke rights on behalf of their children. Okay, I'm in Florida. So you have to talk to your children and make sure that they are aware that if any law enforcement officer tries to speak to them, that they ask for an attorney, right? You don't want them just to ask for you as their parent. You really want them to ask for an attorney. So if you're concerned, and I know there's people like hearing like, oh, ICE is going to go to the schools. What happens if an ICE officer comes to the school? Well, the school is probably going to let them, or is more likely going to let them talk to your child. And your child needs to make sure that they can say, I want to speak to an attorney. Wild, but necessary. So you want to make sure that your kids are aware that they have to say that they want to speak to an attorney. And you can't send an email saying, oh, well, I don't want anyone talking to my child. That may work for the school's policy as far as the school talking to your child about different issues or whatever else. But law enforcement can still go in and talk to your child, and your child needs to know that they need to request an attorney.
And this is something that's kind of jarring, right? I mean, I think Conti, we had a discussion yesterday, kind of preparing for this, and I thank you for giving me time to kind of like, catch my breath and understanding what we're talking about, because it just seems ridiculous, right? That you as a parent, don't have any rights to assert the rights that your child, who's incompetent, is a minor. And obviously, I think there's ranges, right, depending on the age of the child. I mean, I think we talked to a couple of criminal attorneys or friends that, advise that, if the child is young, at least from what I understand, is if the child is very young, sometimes the parent email or letter could help, set aside any involuntary statements made from the child. And it could help that, in that situation. But if the child is, older juvenile, right, 17, 16, 15, unfortunately, I'm going to have this conversation with my son tonight and my daughter, and say, hey, if law, you want schools to be a safe space, right? And you sort of think that, but the reality is that in the current environment, it's not always the case. And so it's important to have those conversations with your children, and explain if there's a situation, you don't have to talk to police, and you need to assert your right to speak to an attorney, immediately.
Right. And I'm sure that's overwhelming for anyone, especially a child, but we need to have those tough conversations with them so that they can confidently say, I want an attorney. Right. So if you're worried about that, you may want to, talk with them and talk to them more than once about what happens if law enforcement in general, any law enforcement, what should you say? What should you do? We have another question. Let's see. We have, what if a parent is deported and you have a child? Does the child automatically go with the deported parent? That's a question for you, Frank.
No, I mean, it depends on the status of the child, right? If the child is a U.S. citizen, and you have the documentation prepared in advance with Conti, right? And you have somebody that can stay with the child, and, some sort of custodial arrangement or relationship, then the child doesn't have to go with you. You can have the arrangement be in place for the child to remain behind with them, particularly if they're a U.S. citizen. If the child is, unlawful, is non-citizen and is here without status, then yes, the child would go with you. But again, if the child is a U.S. citizen, you as a parent have a right to whatever's in the child's best interest. And if you make prior arrangements for them to remain behind with an adult, then the child could remain here because they are U.S. citizens. They have the right to be here.
All right. That was a great question.
Yeah,
all right. We have a comment about parents requesting a meeting with the principal, dean, higher ups in the school, and see what their policies are referenced. You definitely want to talk. Each school is different, and so you want to make sure that you're aware of what the policies are. But I don't see a school principal stopping an officer from coming in and investigating. So, but check with your school, make sure you're aware of what the policies are, and make sure you're informed. All right. This question says, does the school have any rights to limit access to the students, or is this considered a criminal investigation? I don't know. I don't practice in that area as far as the schools and what they're able to do. But I would imagine that law enforcement during the course of the investigation can do what they need to do to investigate their case. So again, I don't know where you're from or where your jurisdiction is, but you want to talk with your school and talk with the deans and principals there to figure out what that looks like where you're at. Okay. Yeah. Any other hot topics that you have going on in immigration? And I have a couple of more questions.
I think so. We talked earlier about things that clients really should do. Any immigrant should do before they're detained, right? And I think we talked about creating an emergency plan, keeping documents in order, and try to be proactive and staying compliant. Get your immigration documents, meet with an attorney regularly, try to figure out a solution. I think the next sort of biggest thing is it happens, right? You're detained. Immigration comes and stops you. What do you do? Obviously, you need to remember, in my opinion, you need to kind of remember your attorney's phone number off the bat, because you may not have access to your phone when you're detained, or you don't know where you're going. So, have access to the attorney and call them, right, immediately, and preserve your right to speak to an attorney. Don't sign anything that you don't understand or you're not willingly accepting to. I mean, as an attorney, sometimes we can set aside whatever you signed and say it was involuntary, but it's a lot more difficult once you've signed it, right? So, it's important to not sign anything that you're not in agreeing to and that you don't understand. And obviously, assert your rights to remain silent, ask for an attorney, and assert those rights.
So can you condense that for us? So I heard you say one, like what? So you need to remember your immigration attorney's phone number. That's a good point.
Yeah, I would, because, when you're in custody, they don't give you your phone so you can, call or use it regularly. So you might want to have, or maybe have at least a, business card on you and try to remember that number, because you need to know who you're going to call. And I would say, make sure you don't sign anything and exercise your right to remain silent. You don't have to tell the law enforcement, exactly what your immigration situation is. There's some disagreement as, I guess if we go back a little bit, the other things that I always, there's another 3 things that I think are really important is making sure that you're not driving without a license. That is probably the number one way in which undocumented immigrants are being picked up every day. Uber, find a friend, public transportation. I know Orlando's not the best for that, but, use one of those means of transportation, because the number one way in which people are picked up every day, and right now even more so than ever, is by driving without a license. Obviously, if you have a work permit, if you have an attorney, making sure that you have a work permit or your visa status is correct. And then obviously being proactive and trying to talk to an attorney to figure out and resolve some sort of immigration documentation for you.
Yeah. All right. That's a good point. Another question that I had, and I think we covered this, but I want to make sure that everyone understands the answer. The question is, can I get a divorce if I'm not a legal citizen? Yes, you can. Again, the courts aren't going through, there's not a checklist about, are you a legal citizen? Are you, like, those questions don't really get asked in family court. If someone brings it up, then it will, come up, but it's not in our petitions. We don't really talk about your legal status in the official petition to start a divorce, or they try to get time sharing. So yes, you can absolutely still file for a divorce or try to get time sharing with your child if you are not a legal citizen in the state of Florida.
Yeah. I think it's obviously the same. This is kind of, I do get this question a lot, but in the same way, you can get married as well if you don't have status either, right? When you go to the clerk of courts, you live in Florida, you're able to get married. You can present documentation from your home country, a passport, etc., and get married as well.
So let me ask you about this adoption. Can you talk about how adoption can help families?
Yeah, that's a good point. And we've worked together, right, on some of these cases and helping people. If you have a close family member that is a U.S. citizen, right, particularly is the easiest way, and you have a child, who's under 16. One of the things that you might want to consider if you want that child and kind of secure that child's future is, hiring Conti to do an adoption. Because if that adoption takes place before the child is 16 years of age, and the adoptive parent is a U.S. citizen, then that adoptive parent can now sponsor that child for permanent residency status. And it's something that I've done, multiple times. And it kind of transformed that child's life, right? I mean, if the child's facing removal to your country with you or elsewhere, you can have that child's future secured through an adoption, and then having the U.S. citizen sponsor that child. So we've done this through, uncles. I think the most recent one we did was for an uncle that sponsored his niece. And, there is an additional requirement that you have to have before the uncle could sponsor the child. The uncle has to have physical custody for 2 years, legal custody for 2 years, and then also physical custody. So there is that issue that the child, it does have to be a bona fide adoption. So the child does have to leave with the person, the new adoptive parent, for at least 2 years before they can sponsor the child. But if you're on your way out because you have no status, or you've been deported, or you're thinking about being proactive and leaving, that is a possibility of them remaining behind with a U.S. citizen.
All right. Awesome. So if you have any family law questions and you need help, please reach out to my firm, Conti Moore Law. We have the phone number here. You can find us on all social media platforms at Conti Moore Law. And you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation with us as well. Frank is awesome. He's an amazing immigration attorney, and he's not just amazing, he is board certified. I think less than 1% or less than 2% attorneys are board certified in the entire state, and he's one of them.
Yeah. It's like 7% in the immigration. There's only 77 of them. But yeah, and we're happy to help. Conti's amazing as well. Don't let her tell you otherwise. She is amazing. She's been doing this for now like 19 years, right? She's
hold on, wait a minute. Don't call me out.
It's coming up. I know you're
together.
I know. So Conti and I went to law school together, and so I know exactly how long she's been doing it. Yeah, go Knowles. So yeah, if anyone has any immigration concerns or questions, in the immigration space, we typically do charge for a consultation. If you call us, we think it's important to get good advice. I mean, it's such a complicated area of law, and you're making lifelong decisions based on this. And so in my view, in the immigration space, where we can't really help everybody, but everybody can learn a lot from speaking with us and kind of understand their situation. So we charge a consultation fee, but we make sure that you are getting an individualized review of your situation for at least 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, to make sure that we're considering everything. And we can make sure that if there's something out there, we're going to find it and make sure that you're able to stay here.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Frank, I really think that we should do this monthly. I even in the few minutes we've been on, we had a lot of questions. I think that we should, if you're willing, hop on for 30 minutes. Maybe we could find like the first Wednesday, the second Wednesday of the week, and we answer questions about immigration and family law. I think that this is a great way for us to use our talents and our skills to help people and to help them understand what's going on. So if you don't mind, let's get it scheduled.
We can do it. I appreciate you having me on, Conti, and getting me on this, technology, Facebook stuff that I'm not so comfortable with, but I appreciate your support with that.
Well, let's keep it going, and let's keep informing our community about what their options are. So if you're willing to do it, we'll get this scheduled.
Let's do it. All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.